All right, let's jump right into it. We're going deep on AI chip export restrictions today, and trust me, this stuff is big. Think global tech shakeup, folks. The Biden administration just dropped some new rules, and, well, they're making waves everywhere from, like, Silicon Valley to countries just getting started building their own AI stuff.
It's kind of wild how these things, semiconductors have become so central to everything.
Right. We've got a ton of news articles, company statements, you name it, and let me tell you, it's juicy.
Real.
Like, did you know that last year, Microsoft went and bought nearly 500,000 of those AI chips?
Wow, yeah, it's a really fascinating topic because this is about way more than just hardware. It's like who controls, the future of AI, right? This tech that's basically poised to reshape everything.
Absolutely. So let's, break it down, right? What are these restrictions, really?
Okay, so basically, picture this three-tier system, right? For who gets these super powerful AI chips. Tier 1, you've got the US's closest buds like Japan, South Korea, the UK, the usual suspects. And for them, it's basically business as usual. No new restrictions.
Gotcha. So smooth sailing for them. What about countries that aren't exactly on the best friend list?
Okay, that's where Tier 2 comes in, and this is where things get a little spicy. We're talking about countries that the U.S. sees as like rivals or potential threats, mainly China and Russia. They were already blocked from buying those top-tier AI chips, but these new rules, they're tightening the screws even more.
So who's left? Who ends up in Tier 3?
Tier 3 is a bit of a hodgepodge. Think like Mexico, Portugal, even some U.S. allies like Switzerland and Israel got tossed in there. And this group, they've got a new cap. 50,000 GPUs per country, that's it.
Hold up, 50,000 for a whole country. That seems like ridiculously small, especially compared to what companies like, Microsoft and Meta are using.
Right. And, we were reading that Microsoft snagged what was it, 485,000 of NVIDIA's Hopper GPUs last year alone. And Meta wasn't far behind. They bought something like 224,000. So you can see how 50,000 for a whole country could become a real problem, a bottleneck for developing AI.
Yeah, talk about a stark contrast. So
Yeah.
Is this cap like a hard stop, or is there some wiggle room?
Well, it's based on this calculation of the chip's power, It's called transistor density, basically a way to measure how much processing oomph you can cram into a tiny space.
Okay, I'm following. More transistors, more power. Right.
Exactly. More transistors mean more processing power, more AI smarts. So you see, this 50,000 number, it's not just about how many chips, it's about their total combined power.
Ah, got it. So smarter chips, fewer allowed, clever, but also kind of confusing.
Yeah, and you can ask for a higher quota, through this special licensing thing, but it's not a sure thing. Lots of red tape. Who knows how easy it'll be to actually get approved.
Sounds bureaucratic. And that Tier 3 grouping, man, it's just weird. It's like they threw allies and, not so allied countries all in one pot and said, here's your chip limit, deal with it.
It makes you wonder what's really going on, right? What's the U.S. really hoping to achieve with this whole thing?
Okay, so let's get into that. What's the official line from the Biden administration? Why do this?
Well, they've got these three main goals they're talking about. First, they want to keep the U.S. at the top of the AI game, which is, pretty important on the global stage. Second, they want to keep potential rivals, those Tier 2 countries, from doing shady stuff with AI, like building killer robots or superpowered spy systems. And third, they want to close loopholes from the old restrictions, basically patch up the system.
Okay, so on the surface, it sounds straightforward enough. But is it really that simple? I mean, isn't there a chance this could backfire? Cutting off access to this tech, won't that have some unintended consequences?
Right. And you know who's been really vocal about that? NVIDIA, the company that makes most of these chips. They are not happy campers.
Yeah, I can imagine. They're like the big kahuna in the AI chip world, so this has to be hitting them hard.
Oh yeah, their stock took a nosedive right after the announcement. That tells you how investors are feeling about this whole thing.
A stock drop, that's never a good sign. I bet investors are worried about more than just lost sales to China, right?
Yeah.
They're probably thinking this is just the beginning. The whole AI landscape could shift, new players could pop up, and NVIDIA might not be the king of the hill anymore.
Exactly. And then there's the question of whether these restrictions will even work. We've seen reports that those fancy chips were already ending up in China, even with the old restrictions. So will these new rules actually change anything? Or will they just drive up prices and create a black market without really achieving their goals?
And what about the countries stuck in the middle, that Tier 3 group? Are they going to get caught in the crossfire?
Definitely a concern. One of the big worries is that these restrictions could stifle AI adoption in countries that aren't enemies, but also, not exactly BFFs with the U.S. They're now stuck with limits on how many chips they can get, which could slow down their AI development and put them behind in important areas. Think healthcare, agriculture, education, the whole shebang.
It seems kind of counterintuitive, right? The U.S. wants to be the AI leader, but they're limiting access to the very tech that's driving progress.
It does, doesn't it? And that's exactly what NVIDIA has been saying. They're arguing that these restrictions are going to hurt innovation and economic growth everywhere, not just in China. Their whole thing is that AI is this amazing tech that could benefit everyone, and by restricting access, you're slowing down progress in areas that could really improve lives around the world.
Makes you wonder, could these restrictions actually backfire? What if, instead of containing China, the U.S. ends up pushing other countries to build their own chip industries, like creating competition where there wasn't any before?
Oh, absolutely. That's a real risk. And it could end up weakening America's position in the long run.
We've been talking a lot about, economics and competition, but let's not forget that this goes way beyond just chips and profits. This is about control over tech that's literally capable of reshaping our world. It's a huge question. Who gets to decide how this technology is developed and used, and what does that mean for all of us?
You're hitting the nail on the head. This is a conversation with massive implications, not just for, governments and big companies, but for all of us. And that brings us to the bigger picture.
And that brings us to part 2. #TTS, the Deep Dive episode 2025-0113, part 2 of 3.
It's crazy just how fast things are changing in the AI world. We were just talking about hundreds of thousands of GPUs Microsoft and Meta bought. It's like a gold rush. It shows you just how much AI is exploding right now.
It's hard to keep up. Every day there's like a new breakthrough, a new company jumping on the AI bandwagon. It's wild.
Yeah. And that's what makes these restrictions so, controversial. Like, are they really necessary to, keep AI out of the wrong hands? Or are they going to end up hurting progress, pushing other countries to just do their own thing and leave the U.S. behind?
Yeah, it's like everyone's trying to figure out what to do with this, this powerful new tool. On one hand, you've got all this potential for amazing advancements, but then on the other hand, there's that fear, the fear of misuse.
Totally. And that brings us to the big question, right? AI and global power, these export restrictions, they're just one piece of the puzzle. It's bigger than that. We're in this global race to develop and deploy AI, and the stakes are higher than ever.
It's not even just about who's got the best chips or the most data anymore. It's like who gets to make the rules, who controls the narrative. It's a whole new ballgame.
And right now, nobody knows how it's all going to shake out. The U.S. wants to stay on top, but other countries are gaining fast.
So, okay, let's bring it back down to earth for a sec. How does all this actually affect, the average person? Let's say you're not building the next ChatGPT. How could these restrictions change your life?
Well, think about it. They could totally mess with the cost of all those AI-powered gadgets and services you use every day. Like your voice assistant, those personalized recommendations, even stuff like healthcare diagnostics. If developing AI gets slowed down or more expensive because of these restrictions, well, guess who pays the price? You do. Higher prices, fewer options, the whole 9 yards.
That makes sense. And it's bigger than just consumer stuff, right? AI is changing everything. Jobs, trade, how whole industries work.
Absolutely. It's being used to automate tasks, make supply chains more efficient, even personalize education. So even if you're not coding AI yourself, it's still impacting your world. And these export restrictions, they're just one example of how governments are trying to get a handle on this crazy new tech.
Yeah, feels like we're at a crossroads. Do we work together and share this technology so everyone benefits? Or do we go down this route of competition and control? And who knows what happens then?
It's the million-dollar question, right? Imagine a world where AI is building killer robots, making life-or-death decisions without any human input. Or a world with AI-powered surveillance everywhere, tracking your every move. That's the kind of stuff policymakers and ethicists are losing sleep over right now.
Yikes, those are some pretty dark possibilities. Sounds like a sci-fi movie gone wrong.
Might sound crazy, but we got to think about this stuff. AI is getting more powerful every day, and we got to be prepared.
So, okay, what now? What should we be watching for as this whole thing plays out?
I'd say keep an eye on how these restrictions actually work in the real world. Will they slow down China, or will they just drive innovation underground?
And what about those U.S. allies caught in the middle? Will they find ways to, skirt the rules, or maybe even start making their own chips so they don't have to rely on the U.S.?
Those are all great questions. And don't forget about companies like NVIDIA. They're not going to just sit back and take it. Will they find a way to work around these restrictions? Or will they shift their focus to other markets where they've got more freedom? It's a chess game, for sure.
So many moving pieces, and the stakes are high.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process.
It is. This is a story that's just getting started, and whatever happens next is going to have ripple effects for years to come.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Restrictions, motivations, NVIDIA, the whole global AI landscape, you name it. But there's one more big question we haven't tackled yet. Hashtag TTS The Deep Dive, episode 2025-0113, part 3 of 3. Okay, so we've talked about what might happen, but what if, and hear me out, what if this all backfires? Like, instead of holding China back, these restrictions actually make them and everyone else push harder on AI.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility, you know. When you try to limit access to something, it often just makes people want to find workarounds, right? Get creative. So what if, like, instead of containing China, the U.S. just accidentally kickstarts a global AI arms race? Everyone's scrambling to build their own chips, their own AI empires.
It totally changed the game, wouldn't it? Like,
Yeah.
the U.S. wants to be number one in AI, but by trying to, keep everyone else down, they might just end up creating more competition, shooting themselves in the foot, basically.
Exactly. It's a tricky situation. On the one hand, yeah, there are real security risks, right? You don't want dangerous AI tech falling into the wrong hands. But on the other hand, if you clamp down too hard, you could stifle innovation and, undermine the very goals you're trying to achieve. It's a tightrope walk, for sure.
It all comes back to this question of, what kind of AI future do we want? Do we want AI to be used for, military dominance and competition? Or do we want to see it used to solve some of the biggest problems we're facing? I mean, think about climate change, poverty, disease. AI could be a game changer if we used it for good.
Right. Those are the real questions, aren't they? And the answers are tough. There's no easy solution. But here's the thing. AI is not going anywhere. It's here to stay, and it's going to change our lives, whether we're ready for it or not.
So then what do we do? We've gone through all this complex information, but how do we actually make sense of it? How do we, everyday people, keep up with this crazy, fast-moving world of AI?
Well, it's moving fast, that's for sure, but that doesn't mean we're helpless, right? First thing is to stay informed. Read about AI, talk about it with people. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You don't need to be a tech whiz to get it. The more we understand, the better decisions we can make about how it's developed and used.
Yeah, it's like anything else, right? The more you know, the more power you have.
Exactly. And don't just sit on the sidelines. Get involved. There are tons of organizations out there trying to make sure AI is developed ethically, responsibly, for the right reasons. Support those groups, volunteer your time, or just speak up. Let your voice be heard.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all, but we can't just give up. We have a say in how this all unfolds. AI isn't something happening to us. It's something we're creating together.
That's a great way to put it. The future's not set in stone. We're shaping it with every choice we make. And what we decide now will determine what kind of AI future we leave for, our kids and grandkids. It's a big responsibility.
Well, I think we've covered a ton today. We've gone deep on these AI chip export restrictions, talked about why they exist, what they could mean for big players like NVIDIA, and the overall impact on AI, globally. Hopefully this has given you a better understanding of what's going on and maybe sparked some interesting questions. As always, we've got more resources linked in the show notes if you want to dive even deeper.
It's been great chatting about this with you. The conversation about AI is just starting, and it's gonna be a wild ride. Buckle up.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Catch you next time.